Welcome to the Code Deploy Go Live podcast, episode 27. I'm Andrew Connell, and I'm here with Julie Turner. If you want to watch this episode as a video, head over to our YouTube channel. You'll find the link in the show notes. SharePoint is celebrating its 25th birthday this month, and Microsoft kicked off the milestone and celebration with a digital event focusing on end-user features that are coming to SharePoint Online, as well as a hackathon that's actually going on now. In this episode, Julie and I are going to take a look at the past 25 years in SharePoint from a developer's point of view. This episode was recorded live March the 5th, 2026. Hey, Julie, how's it going?
Hey, Andrew, how are you feeling? Any better?
I'm feeling better. I'm definitely feeling better.
Awesome.
I guess nobody else has context on that. We had a meeting earlier this week, and I did a half no-show. Basically, I connected to listen and to type on it, but I couldn't talk because I was in a doctor's office. And so I know I talked last episode, I think I said that I had surgery, abdominal surgery. And I learned that there's always stuff that you don't ever anticipate with this stuff. I learned sitting in a car for 5.5 hours with a seatbelt over your lap. It didn't hurt, but apparently doing that twice over the course of like 3 or 4 days. It was, I was supposed to have this follow up. I was going to cancel it. And then I was like, I think I'm going to keep it because I'm feeling something feels pretty painful. And I might as well just go back in. So that's what I was doing then. Everything's all good. It just kind of, I don't know.
Aggravated.
It's kind of like, it was, I don't know. I'm more of a dumbass. I guess I just think it's more a way I would look at it. Like,
well, I concur.
She's
you could have set me off like that. It's like freaking T-ball. You put the stand there, you set the baseball, you handed me the bat, I had the helmet. You're like, please, hit the ball.
Swing. Yeah, that's a grapefruit over the plate. You got to hit that one. But yeah, so anyway, I mean, my PA was just kind of like looking at me, the physician's assistant. She's looking at me and I kind of told her what's going on. And she's like, what'd you expect? And I'm like, yeah, okay.
I don't know that I would have known. I don't know that I would have known that that's a problem. Like, if it's not rubbing, pressing, hurting, why would I think that's a problem?
So she said it's just constant pressure. And then she said, so it was one, just having the seatbelt there. And frankly, I didn't put 2 and 2 together until I was driving to the doctor's office and noticed I was feeling like I noticed it feeling a little bit different when I was driving. And had to slam on the brakes at one point because some jerk cut me off. And I felt it a little bit. And I'm like, oh, yeah. So like, I went down to, it's about 4 to 5 hours away from me. I drove down to St. Petersburg, Florida, last Friday with my wife and drove back on Monday to, long weekend away, celebrate my 50th birthday, go to the races, got to hang out and watch races on a 112-foot, $4 million yacht.
Nice.
To
Super
get used
fun.
to that.
Couldn't we all? Couldn't we all?
It was bonkers. But at any rate, how are you? What's new in your world?
Good. I was on vacation last week, so that was lovely. We went to Stowe, Vermont, which is one of the bigger ski areas in New England. So, and they had a good amount of snow, and we had a really lovely time. It was interesting because my son is now 13 and a half, and we got there in the we had a huge storm on Monday, and we were supposed to go Monday, but we couldn't because we had like a foot to a foot and a half of snow, depending on where you were. So we had to stay home so my husband could. Yeah, so we had to stay home so my husband could clear the driveway. And we could have probably left that night, but to leave, it's a 3-hour drive, and to leave at like 5 or 6 o'clock at night and drive up there to sleep in a foreign bed felt dumb. So we were like, screw it. And my husband was exhausted from clearing the driveway because we have a very large driveway. So at any rate, all that said is we went up the next day. It was great. We cross-country skied for a few hours, which is my part of the vacation. So I got an hour and a half of the vacation for me. The rest of the vacation was for the kid. At any rate, we had a really great time. And then that night went out to dinner, and we're sitting at dinner, and Evan all of a sudden goes, hey, that's my friend Chase from school. And I was like, oh. And so they start texting under the table and make an arrangement to ski all day the next day together. So we had to drop him off at the hill. And so, mountain. And so my husband and I are like, okay, we get him set up to go with this friend and they're off. And, I could text him or whatever because he's got a phone. But then I look at my husband like, I guess it's just us. So then we just spent the whole day like skiing the way we want to ski together. So that was really fun. And then he wanted to do the same thing the next day. So we skied again with this kid Chase the next day. And so we at 2 days it was like we had no child other than dinner. So it was just weird. Weird throwback, but it was fun. We had a good time.
I mean, that's good. That's good. I mean, I always see like the double-edged sword with that, which is kind of like, hey, we go on vacation as like a family to do this. But the other side's kind of like, it's kind of nice that we kind of like, mom and dad got our own little vacation, but I can get the double-sided.
Yeah, except for, here's the 411 on it, right? He's been skiing since he was 2.5.
Uh-huh.
And both Ken and I learned when we were really young. So we're all good skiers, but now that I'm in my mid-50s, I have a very different tolerance to like what I'm willing to like throw, how I'm willing to hurtle my body down a mountain, right? Like that's a very different mental thought process.
You have a prefrontal cortex that's developed. Is that what you're saying compared to your son?
That's exactly what I'm saying. So all that kid wants to do...
Go ahead.
Well, anyway, all he wants to do is ski trees. And my husband will ski trees with him, and that's fine. And they go on all the really, really, really hard off track skiing. That's what they do. But I'm not willing to do that. So when we go skiing as a family, it's never as a family. The two of them go, and I ski by myself. Which is why I shifted to start cross-country skiing more, because I'm like, wow, this is much more my speed. Now I'm alone, but I get to do what I want. And so it's great. So we weren't ever skiing as a family anyway. So, whatever.
I get that. It's funny. I don't know if I'm the only one that feels this way. I mean, maybe you do, but I swear, especially more, I don't know, in the last like 10 years, the whole thing of like hearing people talk about, they don't have a fully developed prefrontal cortex. They don't have a fully developed prefrontal cortex. I swear to God, the more I look around, I'm just like going, kids think they're just invincible. I'm like, yeah, there's another example. Yeah, there's another example. Yeah, there's another example of that. And it's like, yeah, I totally get it. So it's, that's cool. That's cool. I mean, good you got your vacation, good you got away. I saw the big storm rolling in, and I was like, I hope that doesn't impact her, because I saw some of the pictures. I was like, that's some deep stuff.
It was, we had quite a bit. We got about 18 inches, and it took my husband we have a 650-foot, 16-degree driveway.
Whoa.
And so that's a long-ass way. And he has a 48-inch, like, riding tractor with a 48-inch snowblower deck on it. But so he had to do that 3 times, and it takes about 2 hours a sweep. So it's a lot of work. Clear the entire driveway takes a really long time. So it's exhausting. And so he did one like mini one where he just kind of did a little. Then he did a full-blown one, and then later in the day he did another full-blown one. So it was like 4 hours of like, and now my son is old enough where I'm like, you're going out and you're doing all the stairs in the patio and the front, all the paths. So at least my husband doesn't have to do that. And he's only just doing, now I used to do that part of it. But so he was not doing it anyway. But I'm like, I ain't doing that shit anymore. You're 13. You got more muscles than me. You go do it.
I get that. Well, cool. Really cool.
So fun.
I forgot to mention one thing. I did do something, I know that I don't feel old being like turning 50 years old last weekend.
Welcome.
But I did.
Been here.
I wasn't going to say it. But I did check off something that was pretty apropos for being 50. And that was, I now have a new game that I freaking love, and it's shuffleboard. I have never played it before. Yep. I learned how to play it down in St. Pete. I also learned that in St. Petersburg, that's where shuffleboard apparently originated. And that is also the longest or the oldest shuffleboard club in the world.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So it's a cool little spot. It was like, it was They had tons of courts and everything set up. We played 2 games. My wife and I were going up against my sister-in-law and her partner, and we smoked them on the first one. And on the second one, we played to 75 points, and we smoked them on the first one. And we played 13 frames. Is that right? 12 frames. We played 12 frames. And we smoked them on the first game. And the second game, we literally had negative points. Like they smoked out. Like it's almost like, it's like the inverse of Trump. Yeah, well, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Of course, we changed both sides.
So that's why you did well. And then you were like, ooh, now I think I can be great at this. And then you start to try, and then you can't do anything.
Yeah, I was. Yeah. Oh man. I mean,
this is my philosophy on golf as well, because I don't golf regularly, but I'm actually not bad at golf. My first husband was an avid golfer and very, very good. And so I learned how to golf when we were together. But now if I play, I don't play very often. So if I'm playing really badly, I make up a silly game to play to get my mind out of my head, right? Like, so I'll be like, okay, I have to play this entire hole with my putter or some stupid thing like that. And it's silly enough that I laugh and relax. And then the next hole I'll play regularly, and I'm like, oh, all right. And I'm back. Because you get in your head.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
Well, I did it. Yeah. I did a pretty good job of it. But I mean, it was fun. We had a good time. I really enjoyed it. And of course, my wife and I got home, and we looked right away. We're doing a big cruise we both turned 50 this year. I turned 50 last weekend. She turns 50 in May. And our 25th wedding anniversary is in May. And so we're doing like a 11-day cruise in the Mediterranean.
Exciting.
And she pulled up the trip, and she like hands me the phone over to me. I'm like, what is this? I'm looking at it, it's like shuffleboard, indoor shuffleboard on these 3 different decks. And I'm like, sweet. And she's like, I know, right? This is awesome. I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah. She's like, beforehand, she was like, I wonder if they have shuffleboard on a cruise ship. I'm like, that's apparently what you do.
Of course, yes. Yeah.
So, and then you're right.
Nice. Super fun. Welcome to old people's club. You're in.
There. I'm loving it. It's fun. Okay.
Awesome.
With that being said, this episode, we wanted to talk about the 25th birthday of SharePoint.
I was just going to say, this is so accurate for what we were just talking about. We were all sort of in there
you
for
take
the
my
whole
memory
25 years.
Yeah. So last week, Microsoft had a digital event celebrating the 25th birthday of SharePoint. And the digital event was mostly, I mean, my take on it was a little bit of retrospective, but it was a lot of let's talk about like new features that are coming to SharePoint. But it's not stuff that it's like for people who use SharePoint, not for like developers.
Yeah, 100%.
They had the token developer up there, Vesa Yuvinen from Microsoft. They asked him a question or two about development, and he's like, yeah, this doesn't affect the SharePoint framework at all. But I was like, you know what? It'd be nice to have a little bit of a developer, like kind of a take on it. And like for you and me to kind of take some time looking at this. And so I thought that that's what we could do today.
Sure.
I wanted to start off, and the way we structured this, is I want to start off with like 1 or 2 questions for you, and then I'll answer 2 questions of just like some fun stuff. And then we're going to do a little bit of walk down history lane of just kind of recapping the different developer models that we've had for SharePoint. And we'll talk a little bit about the developer community, and then we'll talk, and then I got some questions that, that we can start running through and make sure we don't like go too long. We'll cut some of the questions out if we need to, but
just going to say, we got to watch the clock.
Watching the clock. I got it right next to my camera. So
nice.
And of course, nobody wants to sit through an hour of us doing that. So
yeah, they probably never do. We went really long last time, so we can't do that again. We got to have the clock up. That was pathetic.
Did you notice? So when we were getting started, did you notice in that episode when we were talking about like the state of JavaScript survey?
JavaScript, yeah.
And before we published the episode, the state of React survey results came out.
Yes, I did see that.
And I saw that and I'm like, maybe we should do it. No, let's not.
No, let's not do that.
Let's not do that right now. I think we went too long in the last episode.
Oh, it was terrible. Oh my God. I was like, what are we doing?
Yeah. But at any rate, I want to start off. I'm going to ask you a question, and we'll try and keep these we'll keep these short, right? So my question to you is, how and when did you get started with SharePoint?
that's an easy question. I remember because I was the director of IT at a clinical research lab, and I actually had heard about SharePoint way before SharePoint existed, like before Tahoe, before all of it, because I was working for a company called VIS, and they had a learning management system. And before Microsoft decided they were going to do sort of the SharePoint thing, they were going to do a learning management system. And they had invited my boss at the time, and I was supposed to go and didn't, but my boss went, and they were thinking about buying VIS, the learning management system that they had built. And so I kind of had awareness that because when that didn't happen, SharePoint did happen, like not too long they bought SharePoint instead of buying like this learning management system. And that's how they sort of pivoted on the whole thing. So I was well aware of it way before.
Okay.
But fast forward to 2006-ish, when I was director of IT, I was running this organization, and we were trying to, very small startup, because I started at the very beginning as at this startup that we were putting things together. So I was a department of one doing it all, and wanted to try to build business process solutions for the research lab. And so SharePoint I found out about SharePoint, went to some events, blah, 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 and then I was, I think, maybe the only person. We actually did certification, FDA Cert 21 CFR Part 11 compliance on SharePoint 2007 so that we could use it to store research. So we figured out how to do that, did that, and they had SharePoint installed. And so then I started building things on top of SharePoint for that. So that was my beginning for SharePoint, is bringing it into that. So that was me back in 2007, I would say. I didn't get into the earlier version.
Okay, I got it. For me, wait, what year did you say that was? You started?
In the 2007 version of SharePoint. Okay. So about a little earlier than 2007, but with the 2007 version.
Got it. Okay. So I started I was pushed into it. It was not by choice. It was September 2003. I worked for a company called Fidelity Information Services, FIS, where we basically did like software for like the stuff that runs like Bank of America or at the time Washington Mutual. We did like ran the ATMs. We ran like the back end for all that kind of stuff. I worked in the group that was more about building tools for the organization, not for a product. Yep. And part of those tools was involved in like company public website and intranet and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And when I joined they had just selected SharePoint as their new platform for building out their corporate intranet. And that was SharePoint Portal Server 2003. So they hired me as a .NET person to come in and to help teach all of their developers that were currently Notes developers, and to bring them over to like going from Notes to .NET. So that's where it started. We launched the intro, and then at the same time, we also had a need for like publishing. And so what we did was we took it's actually backwards now I think about it. The public, whatever, it's one of the two. I think it was we did the intranet first, and then we did the public website. But one of them we did first, and the other one did the other way around. We decided we used Microsoft Content Management Server as the public website, and we wanted publishing capabilities inside of the intranet. So we put CMS, MCMS, and SharePoint Portal Server together. At the same time, Microsoft had a skunkworks project called Project Jupiter that was putting SharePoint Portal Server 2003, Content Management Server 2002, and Commerce Server all together that they eventually abandoned. And I was like, and we were doing it. And so we had an MCS consultant, and he's like, really, what are you guys doing? Let me see what you guys are doing. Like, you guys are doing a pretty good job with it. So I got pushed into it in September of 2003. So been with it ever since. Yeah. But okay, so next question I've got for you is, what has been your favorite aspect of being involved with SharePoint?
The community.
You jerk. Did you read? I didn't even write my answer down.
I didn't. You asked. Okay. I thought of an answer immediately. That was my answer immediately.
Okay, you know what?
It's then certainly we'll come back the people.
It's definitely the people for me. So that's another thing we're going to talk about after we do our history thing. So let's table this one and let's come back to it because we both have the same answers. I'd love to hear why you say that. Like, what's the benefit? But we'll come back. So let's kind of jump into another topic I got right now. That is, let's go into an overview or a history of SharePoint development. And don't worry, everybody, we're not going to like dwell a ton on this. But I think it kind of gives us
interesting. It's interesting to go back through it and remind ourselves, because I even had to look back because when we were prepping, I was like, ooh, let me make sure I have all the timelines exactly right. Like I had a general mental model, but I was like, ooh, let me go back and look and make sure that I had the same model. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. That was that timeline exactly. So I think this is fun. I'm glad we're doing this.
Okay. So here's what I'm thinking we're doing. We basically have 4 or 5 models that we can look at. It's really 4 dev models, but then there's one that was like, well, we didn't have a dev model. And so why don't we ping pong it to where one of us leads and kind of explains what that is, and we kind of go through it, and then the other person adds any like color to it or something like that.
Yeah.
After hearing when you started doing this, I think that probably I'm going to take it by myself. I'll go first.
You have to go first.
Because I was there. So
I was not.
So looking back to the very origins of this, and don't worry, everybody, we don't want to take a ridiculous amount of time with this because I want to have more of a discussion after this. And we'll have links in the show notes for like little subsections of our of the topics we're covering so that you can jump ahead if you want. Either the chapter links in the audio or if you're watching this on YouTube or like Spotify or something like that, you can jump ahead. So the first model that we had is kind of the origin, and it's kind of like I guess the first dev model was like not a model. This ranged from the first version of SharePoint, which you could argue is really the first real version of SharePoint was SharePoint Portal Server 2003. It actually was a separate product that's free called Windows SharePoint Services, and then SharePoint Portal Server was built on top of that. We're not going to dwell on that. Let's just focus on the commercial aspect to it because I think that's what people would be more, or the commercial product, because I think that's more what people are expecting. So with this model, there was no dev model at all associated with SharePoint Portal Server. The way it was all done, he was using ASP.NET 2.0 to implement it, which meant everything was all server-side based rendering. There was no like live client-side based rendering or anything like that back in the day. And this existed all the way up until the 2007 version of SharePoint and Office SharePoint or Microsoft Office SharePoint Server 2007. When we were doing this development, like it was all, I considered it incredibly hacky. So there was no docs associated for developers. There were no samples that were out there. I do remember finding a blog from a guy who worked for Microsoft, Maurice Prather, who was an engineer on the SharePoint team. You learned really quick. You had to understand what .NET's code access security was and what the global, was it the GAL or the GAB?
Yep, GAC. Global Assembly Cache.
That's right, the GAC. And what we ended up doing is like you would see stuff. You could see the source code on the pages because it was all on-prem. And when I looked at the code that was on-prem, you could see references to like a SharePoint.dll. And I used Reflector to reflect all of that and see how things worked and find method names and all that kind of stuff, figure out how things worked. And then I was able to then figure out our group and how other developers were. We were able to figure out how to build custom things that would talk to the SharePoint DLL to get data, do whatever, and to start adding our own components to the page. Doing so was very risky because we were modifying the out-of-the-box ASPX pages and ASCX pages, or ASCX files and ASPX pages, and changing the way SharePoint worked. So our bad code could have just brought the whole thing down, which that is definitely something that I did. And one day I will tell my story about how I almost caused the entire intranet not to launch when it was supposed to. It's crazy what happens when you have something inside of a a loop that should be outside of the loop, and it adds another 13,000 calls to every single request for a page. But at any rate, I digress. It's another story for another time. So the biggest challenge that we had... We should do war stories. I wonder if anybody would be interested in our war stories. So the biggest challenge that we had in doing this, you saw a lot of people we didn't see a lot of people doing development with SharePoint because it was so unique like that and it was so hacky. And I don't think many people on the developer side really managed it all that much. But Microsoft did take notice that a lot of people were trying to do stuff and they saw they had an opportunity here. And I think that that's a good thing to say or a good point for us to transition into the 2007 version of SharePoint Server and the first introduction of a real dev model.
So the real first dev model, now you'll have to fill in details because my memory is not as good as yours because I'm older. My memory is just not good.
I'm older, but I'm not that older.
Yeah, but my memory sucks as well. We'll blame menopause.
I can't do that.
See, I win.
I have a secret. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
The 2007 version introduced the WSP or the farm-based solutions. And I'm pretty sure that you had Visual Studio and you had some templates and you could basically say, I want to build a farm-based solution. And that essentially allowed you to essentially compile a DLL. You were writing in C#. Pretty sure it was C#, and you were writing in C# and you were compiling these DLLs that basically had feature sets that you could then install in your tenant and enable in various, like either in a site collection or in webs. You could target, and this is sort of where that comes from because that nomenclature is still around. And for us older developers who have been around a while, we talk about the site and the web. And the site is the site collection, and the web is the webs inside of that site collection. And so that was always the nomenclature. And now they've sort of gotten rid of that. But if you still dev, though, that nomenclature still lives. So we still talk about it that way. Like right now, when you create in SharePoint Online, if you create a site, you have a site in one web. And usually nothing else. So they're almost the same, but they have different properties. And so it's a very mentally confusing thing. And a lot of people are like, what do you mean the web? It's the site used to be called site collection. The web is its container inside of it that has different properties. Whatever. Kind of funny. So in the 2007, we got those WSP files that we would build, those packages we'd upload into the farm and deploy into the GAC, which is the global assembly cache. I remember having... You know how in Windows, you don't use Windows. Well, you did then probably.
I did.
You have the favorites, like you go in and you take a folder or whatever, and you can favorite the folder. I always had the GAC as one of my favorite things because you'd go in there and be like, oh, where's my deploy? Oh, okay. No, delete it out, jam it back in because things weren't doing what you wanted them to do, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a lot of monkeying around in there. Between 2007 and 2010, we still had that same model, but we ended up with the ability to create custom master pages. And I think that introduced client-side modifications that were much greater than what had been being done before. I mean, it's always been HTML, CSS, derived from ASP, but still the end game when it's rendered, it's HTML and CSS. That was always sort of there, but we didn't have the same kind of ability to modify in 2007 that we did once we could create these custom master pages. So creating the custom master pages allowed us to basically say, okay, I know that this is what the layout should be. Well, I should probably, for those who don't know, a master page used to be, if you're not familiar with an on-prem product, you might not know this, but essentially it was a layout. Like think of it as a page layout or a template on how the SharePoint content would get rendered onto the page. So it was essentially like a set of containers laid out on the page that you could say name, and then you could target content for those containers. And so once we could create custom master pages, well, you could modify everything around it and all the CSS. So you could really customize how visually SharePoint would appear. And this was a thing. And Derek was one of the people who specialized in this. My coworker, Derek Cash-Peterson, was building custom master page solutions for people because nobody wanted SharePoint to look like SharePoint. So that was like the start of I want SharePoint to look like something different. And when Derek and I were working together in our previous world, that was like our bread and butter. Customizing, doing custom master pages and custom visualizations for intranets for companies who wanted to essentially have their intranets be branded in their, following their corporate guidelines and branding. So
that's a great rehash of what it was.
Anything I missed? I might have missed some stuff.
I wouldn't. Well, I mean, we're both going to miss stuff on this because it's been 25 years.
Well, that's my problem.
I think that, like, the way I like to look at it, when I give it like as a nutshell to people, is say that this is the version that when Microsoft said, we need to give people a way to be able to build custom things and then get them deployed. Because before, in 2003, when I did that, if I had a farm of multiple servers and had multiple web servers, I had to manually copy files to a specific place on the file system, restart the web app so that SharePoint or restart IIS, restart the application pool. That's what it was called. And to get that stuff deployed. And what I think that the big thing is that Microsoft did in this version, 2007 version, was they introduced a plugin model and a distribution model. And the plugin model was features, which those XML folders with XML in it, and solutions, which was what you said, the WSPs, which is a way to package up our features and code and deploy it to SharePoint, which they put it down on the disk.
And that still exists today. For people that don't know, if you go into the old classic admin page behind a site, and you could see site features and site collection features. And if you dive into there, that's all the old classic features where in the past, when we would deploy these solutions, you would see your custom solution with your name, your icon, your description show up in there, and you would enable them into a particular site collection. So that was... so that was how that.
And you can see that today too. I mean, it's like
100%.
Not only today, but you can also see it like when you build a new SharePoint Framework solution. If you go look at the package-solution.json file, you'll see a section in that JSON file that refers to features. And once you build, so if you build the project and you go look at the stuff that's actually going into that the WSP file. Which used to be a cabinet file, Microsoft cabinet file, proprietary with Microsoft. Now it's a zip file, same file name. But when you open up that WSP, you look inside of it, you will see XML files, and it is all the same feature manifest, element manifest files that we used to use back in 2007. So it all originated from there. The thing that started happening, I think, at this version that started to make Microsoft look at other options is that I remember this time that watched SharePoint, this was the inflection point. These were the good days of SharePoint in terms of growth and business. It was fantastic being able to build a legal firm more than they were billing me for how much stuff the work that I was doing for them. But what we started to see was that so many people were interested in doing this. The challenge is that SharePoint was really expensive. I mean, you spent $30,000 for a license, and you also needed a Windows license and a SQL Server license. You needed multiple of these to stand up a farm. And so so companies saw this as it was, and you also need a lot of people to do it, to manage it as well with specific skill sets. So we started to see the growth of an industry in the SharePoint world of companies essentially leasing out SharePoint tenants to customers that they would stand up and maintain, but then they could sell that service to their customers. The downside with this, though, is that you couldn't have two customers on the same tenant because it wasn't a multi-tenant based application. So Microsoft had a couple different problems with this. Number one is they were like, we need to have a way to make this product more multi-tenant, but at the same time, we need to also make sure that developers have a way to deploy their solutions that a solution that's blowing up will not take down the entire farm. It'll only take down part of that tenant. right?
And that happened regularly back in our WSP days. That was like you had to have a dev farm. You had to have a dev farm so that you could test your deployment and verify, and you had to do it off hours. Those were the days when, working on a Saturday night to deploy your solution was the de facto standard. Yeah,
totally. And so at the same time, so like what you were just saying was that Microsoft also saw that when they looked at all of the challenges that Microsoft that customers were facing in terms of like filing support tickets for outages, like the vast majority of those support tickets were developers' fault. We were breaking, our stuff would break and it would bring down the process and they have to reboot it. So they're like twofold. One, got to give developers a way to customize stuff without bringing down the rest of the farm when it breaks. Two, we got to make sure that we give them a way to customize stuff, but it's going to work inside of a multi-tenant environment. In my opinion, that was what the big push was for SharePoint Server 2010. So I'll transition to that one. I'll transition to that one, and then I'll hand it over to you to kind of wrap up anything I've missed in this one, and then you can take us into really the next model we got years later. So in the 2010 version, what we did was Microsoft introduced something called partially trusted solutions. We all know them as sandbox solutions. And the goal was to really address those two things that I just mentioned. Now, there's a lot of other things that 2010 gave us, but that's the big thing for developers. As they said, at the time, the 2007 version was just, here's how you build SharePoint solutions. We just built them as solutions. We didn't have another name for them. When sandbox solutions or partially trusted solutions came out, now all of a sudden we had to call those other things a different name. And it's like, oh, those were fully trusted solutions because they went in the GAC. So what sandbox solutions did is not only did they go through and to kind of make it where things were just working the tenant, but Microsoft also added a couple other development tools that were available to us. So they gave us client-side-based SDKs, known as the client-side object model or the CSOM. There were 3 of these at the time. One of them was a .NET version that we could use to connect from, like, say, a console app or something else could talk to SharePoint from off the box. They had a series they started to make some investments in REST-based APIs from the old school, like ASMX style web services, SOAP-based services. Going back to the CSOM, they also added in not just a .NET client, but they added in a Silverlight client that Steve Jobs basically killed a couple years later. And then they gave us a JavaScript client, the JS object model, the JSOM, or the JavaScript version of the CSOM.
Yep.
So all of this was to really get developers to say, Microsoft was really trying to push the message of, hey, get off the SharePoint server, stop building stuff that's going to go inside, that's going to run on the SharePoint server. But if you are, you're going to have to play inside of this. I hate the name they chose for it because it confused so many people, but you're going to have to run in a sandbox process. So that's not like a separate environment. It's a separate executable where our custom stuff would run. And if it failed, then it would only bring down the custom code engine for SharePoint. So the rest of SharePoint would stay up. That's kind of where I would say, I guess one more thing I'd say to it too, to round it out, was that this was not widely accepted by developers. Customers did not like this option. It was limiting in what they could do when you compared it to fully trusted solutions. And customers just said, we have to come up with better options here and alternative options, because this tooling or this development model for Microsoft is it's almost like dead on arrival for us. We can't satisfy customer requirements like we used to before. So people kept still doing farm trusted solutions or fully trusted solutions. And when they couldn't, then they started doing more stuff client side that was running like as jQuery-based solutions, or using other libraries like that your colleague Mark Anderson created, SP services, to make it easier to talk to SharePoint to get data out and stuff. So customers were kind of starting to do their own thing to get their stuff done.
Yeah. And you're going to end up having to step in a little bit on this, because then we got to 2013 and they added a new model called the add-in model. And
it was called the app model first.
I skipped it. I'm calling it the add-in model, and I skipped the whole damn thing. So I know little to nothing about it. I've never built one in my entire life. You're skipped
fortunate.
it.
That's fortunate.
Well, I had my child in 2012. 12, and that thereby did not go to the 2013 SharePoint conference, ergo missed the whole thing. All my colleagues learned about it.
Yeah.
They picked it up. I was working with Bob German and Derek at the time. So Bob and Derek learned about that, and all the work that was coming in went to them to use the, app model, add-in model, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, still doing sandbox solutions, full trust solutions, all that for the customers still on the older versions of everything.
Yeah.
And that's when Bob German said to me, I don't think this is going to last. This add-in model it's not going to work. They're going to have to come up with something different. And he and I started working on something we called the Widget Wrangler and developed our sort of own, quite frankly, version of the SharePoint framework. We essentially created a way to load content into the browser from ironically, what we called a CDN SharePoint site. So we would create a content delivery SharePoint site, and we would put our code in there, and then we would load it with the Widget Wrangler wherever it needed to be loaded. So
Got it.
That was then what I shifted to, and that's what we started doing for our clients right away. So we sort of, yes, we could do the add-in model. We probably did it for 6 months at the company that we were working for, but then we never did it as a company. We started just doing the stuff in the methodology that Bob and I sort of created. And then the SharePoint framework came along. So you're going to have to do any more in-depth about the add-in model than other than I know. The one piece I do know is that it used an auth model, Azure ACS, that is just retiring now, which I think is hilarious.
In under a month, not right now,
And
but at the beginning of April.
Now in this era, right? Right now, right now.
So the big thing with this one, then the add-in model is that this is Microsoft basically saying, okay, fine, you don't like sandbox solutions? Here's what we got to do. We have got to get you guys off the server, talking basically to developers, saying that, look, we have to go through and make it to where we can host SharePoint, or people can host SharePoint in a multi-tenant environment, but developers in it, you have to do it in a cloud-based environment as well. As this is when the precursor to Microsoft 365, which was basically Exchange Online and SharePoint Online at first.
Right. Yep.
And we called it Office 365, where Microsoft said you need to have a way to be able to run your custom code in SharePoint, but we're not in the hosting business for custom stuff. That's not how this is going to work. So the add-in model originally shipped with 3 different types of add-ins, what are called auto-hosted, provider-hosted, and SharePoint-hosted. SharePoint-hosted is very similar to what we have today with the SharePoint framework conceptually, where it basically said you deploy your SharePoint solution, but 100% of it is going to run in the browser. So it may have HTML, CSS, JavaScript, but all SharePoint does is serve it to the browser, and then it runs in the browser, and that's how it's going to be manifested. And they had a way for doing web parts, and you could provision lists and stuff like that, still using features. The provider-hosted model was a way for you to say, I'm going to register what I'm extending or building for SharePoint in SharePoint, but I'm also going to, but all my code is going to run outside of it. So I'm going to have to build my own web services where we're hosting that stuff somewhere else. And SharePoint will simply call over to where my stuff is running and respond back with what it needs for that stuff for it to work in SharePoint. So I would have to have my own custom deployment for provider-hosted stuff. Auto-hosted said, we will spin this up for you. We'll do provider-hosted, but we'll host something for you where it spins up in its own process, and that'll just be part of the product. Auto-hosted didn't last very long. Ultimately, it got killed off, and because Microsoft just didn't want to host it anymore. They said that people weren't using it, which I don't know if that was true or not, but it was more like, hey, this is expensive for us to manage. We don't want to do this. Provider-hosted is just fine. But the big thing this brought to us that I thought that was an advancement was, number one, it really introduced OAuth into the development model. We did have the using ACS for the app model, which ultimately went away, and now we got Azure AD. Now it's Intra ID for having app identities, so that now stuff wasn't just user-based identities; it was user and/or app identities. And they really leveled up their investments when it came to the REST APIs for SharePoint as well. So that's what the added model is all about. Actually, originally, like I said, it launched as the app model, and they also launched at the same time the app model for Office add-ins. But when they wanted to put when they put Office on Mac and on the iPad,
I couldn't do it anymore.
Is that right? Well, Apple or Steve Jobs told them, you're not going to have apps for Office because those apps, we already have an app store for Apple, and you're not going to have apps inside of apps because we consider your Word and Excel and everything, we consider those apps. So you're going to have to rename it. And a friend of mine had to make the call, a friend of ours had to make the call and say like, okay, we're not going to call it the app model anymore. We're going to call it the added model because Steve Jobs says we can't do it. And that was like the dirty little secret that nobody knew for a long time, but it was like, it's okay.
That's all right.
What was funny about that though, is that leading up to the SharePoint framework, and I'll let you describe the SharePoint framework because I had to jump in and do this one too.
Yeah, it's whatever.
At about 2015, 2016, customers really didn't like this add-in model. They still can do the same kind of customizations they were doing with fully trusted solutions. So what they did was they started, this is really the precursor for the SharePoint framework. People started to build client-side solutions and do DOM model, browser DOM, DOM model, document object model, manipulation using JavaScript with tools like jQuery and getting all that stuff deployed loaded in SharePoint using the content editor web part and the script editor web part. And when Microsoft in 2016, they're like, why aren't people doing the add-in model? And they go look at the SharePoint Online, they're like, by far, the two most popular web parts were the content editor web part and the script editor web part because that's how people were doing it. And they're like,
content editor 2010, script editor 2013, but still had content editor. So script editor was the preferred way, but you could do either. So yeah.
And so they looked at that. I'll never forget. I was in Redmond in 2016. I think in the summer of 2016, they brought me in to do a session at their internal conference for as a company. It's called Tech Ready. And I was showing how to use a SharePoint hosted add-in as the deployment vehicle for building a single page app using Angular and getting that to work. So building real client-side apps. And they pulled me aside when I was done and they're like, we want to show you something. And that's when I saw the spec for the SharePoint framework. And they're like, here's how we're going to go. Here's what we're doing to try and address this. And that's where I hand it over to you.
Yeah. And so I sort of started this conversation already because like I said, when we skipped the add-in model, I'm just going to keep referring to it that way since that's the name we landed on. When we skipped the add-in model, like I said, I was working with Bob German. He had worked for Microsoft previously. So he probably had, people he was talking to internal to Microsoft who were probably cluing him in a little bit that this was the road that we were going down. So it was about formalizing what was already being done. And one of the bad parts about the content editor, the script editor web part was that if you were just doing one-off thing, if you were building one little customization, it was fine, right? Like you'd put the script editor web part on there, you would either paste your script, your HTML, CSS, JavaScript all into the script editor web part, or you'd put it in a file somewhere and then you'd point the script editor web part at it to load it. And that's where the content editor web part was a little bit superior because it had a property where you could point it at a file that you wanted it to run. Anyway, long story short, that was great for one-off things. But what a lot of people were doing, and it's one of the things that we see even today, and this is not to like bring this into it, but this is my argument about Power Platform. It's great for one-off things, but when you need to build something that you want duplicated in many, many sites or, across things that are going to have multiple instances of it, that falls apart quickly because it's a lot to manage. So if you're pasting in scripts over and over again, every time you want to change the script, you got to go find every instance of the place where you were pointing it at the script. And so this was sort of where if you centralized the files that you had for the script, that was a real benefit because now you could upgrade, you could, change the script in one location, and now everywhere that script is being used gets that new update. And, this is where Bob and I had this idea, well, if you think about the security of a SharePoint site, if you have contributor rights to a document library and somebody else only has read-only, and you turn on versioning and major versions, when you had a minor version, nobody could see it. They would see the last major version. And so we use that ability to basically create a CDN and basically use the check-in model to say we're in dev for the next version, or we're in production because we published the version. Anyway, so that was our thinking behind that. But the SharePoint framework really took that and made it a first-class citizen in SharePoint, right? So essentially, we were both at it. There was a dev kitchen in 2016. It's actually where I met Mark Anderson, that as the story goes, and the bacon donut and all the things. But Bob brought me with him. He got invited and he was able to bring somebody. And so he and I went to that dev kitchen. And Mark was there, and you were there, and a bunch of other of our friends were there, or whatever. And that's when we really started to, play around with this model, which was to say, okay, here's clients, a project framework by which you can build your custom HTML, CSS, and JavaScript using the React framework is where they started, although you and I were both on the same page because we were Angular users and we were pushing hard for Angular at the beginning. I remember that was one of the things that you and I really bonded over, like Angular all the way, which I laugh about now because I'm like, well, why was I so obsessed with that? But whatever, it's fine. Yeah. But then, so using React, because React was already on the page, and basically building your customizations and having a method by which you could deploy them. So you would be able to load your package into the same gallery where the add-ins were going. So it felt familiar from that perspective. You would go to the app catalog, which was where SharePoint add-ins were deployed from, and you'd be able to, deploy your solution that way, and it would be available to be added into sites and webs and whatever. Look at me pointing to that old saying. So that's definitely where we got to. I would say, I think it was around, when was the introduction of the graph? When did that happen? Do you know? Do you remember? I feel like it was around 2 years after that, 1 or 2 years after that.
I thought that the graph was, I think. Am I wrong? I might be wrong. I think the graph was before that. I think the graph was before the SharePoint framework, because I remember the precursor to the graph of the 3 or 4 services, then the discovery service. That was all 2014. I thought it was like 2016. Well, you know what? Who knows? It's Microsoft Graph. At any rate. And was. I feel like I wanted to just point out something that I wanted to draw a thread through something where you talked about when we moved from SOAP services to the JavaScript object model that we had, the JSON, you made the point that Microsoft really invested in APIs at that point, and I absolutely was the case. It was a game changer. If you were building customizations on top of the platform, you all of a sudden went from only having the SOAP services to having almost full coverage. It was pretty amazing, the coverage that we had for publicly available, documented, RESTful endpoints that we could do everything that SharePoint could do, basically. There was a few things that still fell back to the client-side object model, the SOAP services, excuse me. Well, they're all intertwined anyway, but there was a few things like creating document sets is a SOAP thing, and blah, 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 blah. There was a few little things, but in general, we had such full coverage. And then you did an aha. I saw your face do it. So when was the graph? So the graph was originally announced in November of 2015. I remember it was called the Office 365 Unified API, and then that was rebranded to the Office Graph, which then at the Build 2017 conference, which I believe would have been like the first half of 2016, would have been is where they really started to push it as Microsoft Graph.
Okay. So then that jives with my mental model because I'm like, SharePoint Framework came. We were all in on still...
SharePoint Framework didn't come out until February 2017.
But, I mean, we were at a dev kitchen in 2016 is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Sorry, yes.
Sorry. Anyway, so we were starting to talk about that, but Graph wasn't a big thing yet. I mean, it was... It was, the unified API, and it was really, we still were just leaning hard on the SharePoint REST endpoints. And then the Graph sort of kept growing and growing and growing. And we just kept getting the guidance. Well, the Graph is the way we want you to access everything in Microsoft 365. And there was a ton of pushback on that. And I think there's still a ton of pushback on that because it never covered everything, right?
Yep.
It's still to this day, it is a fraction, not as small of a fraction, but still a fraction of what's available in the SharePoint REST APIs that still have not kept up with the changes in the SharePoint user experience. Yep. And even the Microsoft 365 platform all up. And I the reason I'm bringing this up, which I bring up all the freaking time, is because the reason we viewed that 2010 to 2013, maybe even to 2016 time as like the golden time is because we could do everything that we needed to do on the platform with the APIs.
Yep.
You could do everything. So getting adoption when the platform didn't do exactly what a client needed as consultants anyway, or as users, when the platform wasn't exactly what you needed, you could build anything you needed to build on top of it that you could build with, client server technology. And that was the golden time in my mind, because we were just enabling people left, right, and center. And the adoption blew up, I think, because of it. And where I think, not to forecast too much, but I think the thing that we're sort of losing is because the focus now is on just the UX. We've lost that golden time of platform as a service. Remember when we started sort of saying, well, it's not really software as a service, it's more platform as a service, or it's this combination of both because you could really build on top of it. We're losing that. We're absolutely losing that ability. And it's shifting to back to software as a service, and almost to the point where you can't adopt it if it's not exactly what you want.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make that statement.
Well, no, and I'm glad you did, because we're going to, in our questions, I wanted to ask you something and see what you had to say about it. But I thought it was a great, like, just a recap of like what the SharePoint framework is too. And I think it's a great way to kind of like, I think it's a great point to where we can start transition into the next part that we wanted to cover. Also because I just looked at our clock and I was like, damn it, we did it again. So, and of course I'm sitting here in my notes and I'm going, make sure Julie adds in some topics because we're a little light.
Yeah, no, we're not.
That's how I do my sessions at conferences, right? I always have more, I always run out of time. So I want to ask you, I've pared down our questions to just two things.
Yes, I see that. Much better. Yes.
So I want to ask you first, and let's both try and cap ourselves on like how much time we spend in our little monologues on here.
I got my timer. Okay.
All right. So first, you mentioned the community earlier. It was about the people, and that's one of the reasons you got into one of the things that you found is your favorite aspect to it. What do you want to say about the community of SharePoint?
There's things that are floating in around my mind. I'll try to like summarize them pretty well. One of the things that I definitely remember about when I first moved into consulting from working as a director of IT and moving into consulting is that there was definitely sort of people who worked on SharePoint and did development on SharePoint were sort of second-class citizens in a lot of ways. Like there was a view that you weren't a real developer if you developed on and you did develop it on that platform. And I always thought that was sort of ridiculously ironic because we had to have so much domain specific knowledge about that platform to be able to, and then the knowledge of general development, but with the specialization of that platform. In a lot of ways, our job was harder than every other general developer because they just had to know the general stuff. We had to know the general stuff and how to apply it to this very specific platform. And I always thought that was kind of bleh, you know what I mean? So, but it isolated the group of people who were on that thing. And I think what then evolved out of that isolation was like a real community because it was hard. Like, I mean, before we knew each other personally, you were doing a lot of training and stuff. So you were out in the community a lot more. I remember reading your blogs, I remember I vividly have a memory of sitting in my office as a director of IT, working on how I was going to develop stuff and how I was going to use SharePoint 2007 and reading blog posts from you. I remember the monitor being there. I remember your blog post being up and going, yeah, this guy knows what he's doing. Yeah, this makes a ton of sense. I'm going to follow that. So you know what I mean? Like, so that community developed because we were sort of like, this is the wrong word, but like Stockholm syndrome, right? We were all like in the trenches together and had to support each other because it was hard. And you know, when things didn't work, there wasn't always documentation and we had to support each other to figure out how to make this shit work. And I think that created a very tight community. And sort of like family, it doesn't mean we don't fight and have our like cliques and our niches and our whatevers, but in the end, the community is the community. And at least among the speaking community, I mean, I feel I didn't join that part of it until, and I remember this vividly as well, because I was at Blue Metal and Bob and I had worked on the widget wrangler and figured that out. He came up with the concept of it. Absolutely. It was his like origin idea. And then I said, well, I'll try to build what your vision is. And I built the code and it was his vision. And then he's like, we should just talk about this together. And I'm like, what? Nobody wants to hear me talk about it. He's like, they do. You should talk. You should do a talk with me. We'll do a talk together. And we did a first talk together. And it was that embracing of bringing me into the community that, do you know what I mean? That I think that part of it was, so for me, the community was very much, and I try to pass that forward. I hope I do in some ways, but I'm also an introvert. So sometimes I can be standoffish and quiet and try to run away. But in general, I try to like pass that forward or pay that forward. But I think that is the reason why the community is so important to me. I think I summarized it in 2 minutes.
Well, the nice thing too is that the way you said it, you basically echoed everything what I was going to say, which is one exception. So I'm going to say +1 to everything you just said. I'll save you guys a couple minutes there. The other side of it too, that I think has been really fortunate, where I feel like I've been really fortunate with this, is that this product has enabled me to meet people around not just around the country, not just around North America, but around the world, who are by far my closest friends. And it's, on one side of it, I look at it and go, yeah, it's kind of sad that some of it that you get, your closest friends are people that you know at work, and it's not like people that you know like at home and everything. Or whatever. I think it is like being able to go, like when I used to go into a conference and knowing that like some of your best friends are there and you've known them for me, like 23, 24 years for some of these people going all the way back. And just, we know each other on the personal side. We've watched each other grow up. We've lost friends. We've had, a lot of us have had kids. A lot of us have lost hair. A lot of us have changed quite a bit, but a lot of us have jumped around to different companies and still stay in the same space. It's provided a good career. But it's really it's also just like, they're some of my closest friends, and it's cool. It's really cool. So that's me. That's the big thing of the community, is I think it's giving me the ability not only to make friends outside of for the first half of my life, which is a very America-centric mindset, because I didn't travel much. And when I started having the opportunity to travel more for work and spend time in Europe and having a way to look back at where I was from, it gave me a different perspective on the world, and meeting people who have different perspectives and very different perspectives, not just like American perspectives of different perspectives, but it's people who are not American and who are much more diverse. I've become a better person. I've become a more whole or rounded person, I think, through that experience. And I know you can get that from a lot of different experiences, but for me, this is how I did it through this community, and I'm fortunate.
Yeah, I would echo that entirely. That making friends globally has been the second best part of it, right? Like I have a way to support my family, a career out of it. I echo what you said about these are my closest friends. They literally are the people I go on vacation with. Like, okay, we're going on vacation. I'm going to pick these friends. These are the people I want a vacation with. The people that I met in the community. So they're literally that close to me as friends. And so I completely echo what you're saying.
I didn't realize how big of a deal it was to me until my first in-person conference after COVID. And I remember sitting in the lobby of that Sheraton Hotel in Seattle, first conference I attended. And we just sit there at night. A couple of us had just had dinner. A couple of us were just sitting there having a couple drinks.
I remember that.
And I remember at some point I was like going, yep, I'm done. Because it's not that I was overcome with emotion, but I was starting to become overcome with emotion. Not in the sense that I was going to just start like crying or whatever, but I just had all this like, oh my God,
joy.
This is what I didn't realize how much of me has missed this. And this was just missing from who I am.
I remember that event vividly because we were sitting near each other. I remember that. Yeah,
I totally do.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
So the last question I have for you, we've already gone over an hour, so what the hell? We'll do picks in just a second, but what's your take on SharePoint development today?
I don't want to be negative. I don't want to be negative. This has been a wonderful walk down memory lane. I complain about the state of Microsoft 365 a lot. I don't want to be negative. I don't want to be negative. I'm not. I'll summarize it by saying I'm concerned for its future, and maybe we'll do another episode on more. I don't want to be negative. This has been beautiful.
I will just say that I'm not negative on it, but I think it is more. SharePoint is not what it was before, where it was kind of like the thing that did everything. And now it's like, nope, they've carved out a lot of those things and they've put those in specific products, or they've taken those things out to different things, or they've sunned down them. It's not trying to do everything.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that part of it, but yeah.
And when I look at like SharePoint development today, it's limited to the SharePoint framework. I don't have a problem with that. If you want to get to the data that's in SharePoint, we have the Microsoft Graph to get to the data as documents and lists, document libraries and lists. There's obviously stuff that we would like, a better Pages API, since there's pages that are inside of.
I'd like a Pages
SharePoint.
API.
That's more accurate. I think so. I just think it's like, for people to think that, it's like really good or really bad. I'm not negative on it. I just kind of think it's got a diminished relevance from what it had 10 years ago. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's just a thing. And I think that the people who are just SharePoint developers, I think it's now you look at it and say like, well, we're really Microsoft 365 developers, and you have a bigger suite that you're playing with. So to me,
100%. 100%.
So
100%. What I guess I'm leaning more, it's I can't do the thing. I can't do the thing that I was talking about the golden age of, when you had an API that could do everything. I have clients who need, and this is where your business and my business make us have a different perspective on it. I get requests to do things that I either think I can and find out I can't, or can't do and have to say, we really can't do that. And that is new for me. Like, it always was the limitation of what I had the skill to build. Now it's the limitation of the platform to allow me to build it. And that's the part that I guess I'm negative about. All right.
Yeah, I get that. Okay. Well, it's been a fun 25 years. It's not like it's over.
It has. No.
We'll have to see where it goes next.
I'm not dying yet.
Not, as far as I know, I'm not. So, yeah. So, with that being said, oh, great. I just got my dogs to start barking. So, next question I got for you is, do you have any picks for us today?
I do. And I hesitated on whether or not I was going to bring this up. Several weeks ago, I saw this article about Apple is working on or to unveil a new wearable AI device. So essentially like a pin that has camera and AI and a microphone. And essentially it's going to help you with your day. And I remember reading this and just going, wait, what? it's, I can see a side of it where it's like, ooh, that's really cool. What could it do? But the privacy side of it made me kind of go, so wait a second. Somebody could be walking around, and unless I notice it, they're filming everything, no matter where they go. Be that a locker room, a doctor's office, their bedroom, wherever it might be, they can be filming, recognizing, recording, listening. I don't know. And I know that a lot of the argument that people, when you bring up that privacy thing, a lot of people go, well, people could do that today with a phone. Except for I see them with a phone.
Yeah.
Like they're holding the phone. I mean, they might be holding it close to them and they might be like trying to obscure what they're doing. But in general, you kind of know when people are filming you with a phone, right?
Yep.
Not that I love that, and not that it can't be sneakily done. I already am not happy with that. But to add this to it, and then there was some more stuff that came out this morning, which is why I decided to bring it back. But there's a article, the second article is that the Ray-Bans glasses with the cameras in it, apparently they just exposed that there's a private firm in Kenya that is a subcontractor of Meta, where they're sending video footage unknowingly from people's eyeglasses to this place in Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya, to review this footage. And apparently people that work for this subcontractor are telling that they're seeing just people naked, people having relations, people in doctor's offices, people committing crimes, like all, which maybe that one's a good one, but this is a privacy situation at a much bigger level. And the fact that you don't necessarily know somebody's walking down the street wearing a pair of these glasses and filming you, and you could say, well, don't do anything wrong. But well, given today's general vibe, I'm feeling not great about any of this. Like, I want this to stop. So,
yeah.
At any rate, that's my pick for today because it's very disturbing. I'm feeling disturbed.
Yes. Yeah. I have so many thoughts on this. I mean, this is definitely not a thing for me that I would want to get. I see like that. What is it? There's a device, like a little pendant that you can like clip on your shirt or something that will allow you to like automatically record like your conversations and stuff like that. I'm like, no, I'm not a fan. Do I record conversations on my phone? Yeah. But is it obvious that I'm doing it? Yeah. And
did you ask permission? Did you get consent?
I mean, in cases where I should, yes, I do. In cases where, I don't know. I guess there's some parts that are like, I probably don't fall on the legal side in terms of like, I think that if I'm going to go through and record a conversation, it's for my own personal notes so that I can focus on the conversation because I have a bad memory and I don't plan on sharing. Like, I just want a bit of a transcript that have bullet points on it.
Yeah, 100%. That's valid.
But I totally get someone's going to say, no, but that doesn't fall in like the legality side of it. I'm like, I understand that. And I'm just saying like how my use case is for it too. Sure, I also go over the speed limit. And I know I'm not supposed to do that either, but I don't do it all the time.
Area.
But
I hear you. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are good finds. I was hoping it was going to be, I thought that Apple was working on a new wearable that is not an AI thing, or it's probably going to have AI infused in it, but essentially their version of the Oura Ring. And I was like, oh, hell yeah. I love your watch. I would love to go through and I'd love to see how Apple does it for, how Apple does that. And
might be interesting.
Yeah. I tried an Oura Ring once. I couldn't justify the cost of it. Yeah. So I sent it back in my window that I had. But I like the concept. Whatever.
Your pick.
Good picks, Julie. So my pick is something that just came out yesterday? Today's today, the 5th. 2 days ago. Wow, I'm a little late. So we're now 4 months in since Claude announced Anthropic announced skills for Claude. And since they announced it, they've noticed some things about skills. They say, we've noticed that most authors of skills are subject matter experts They're not engineers, and they know their workflow, but they don't have the tools to tell whether a skill still works with a new model, or the triggers when it should work with that model, or even if it's the skill, or if it even improves the experience after they make an edit to it, or when a new model comes out. So what Anthropic did is they've announced a skill creator. They've announced enhancements to their skill creator skill plugin that they have that is going to add more like rigor to the development of it. So there's ability to do things like testing, benchmarking, and iterative improvement. Effectively, one of the things I love about this is that you can, they're now bringing the concept of evals, which is a way of kind of think evals as like unit testing for AI or agents.
That. Yep.
So they're adding that to it. It also is making it easier to, it does what Claude does when you use evals is when you give it the evals, it spins up 2 agents that runs all of the prompts against one instance that has the skill and one instance that does not have the skill. So you can see what like an A and a B test is. Is this skill better or worse?
Oh, okay.
And it is a little, I mean, you're adding a little bit extra cost to it to go through and run both of them. But what's nice about that too, is it allows you to see, am I making improvements? Am I making it worse? Is this thing not useful or not? And it really makes skills more of a development kind of a process to create them than it does of just kind of making it like an art form or something and say like, do I still need this? Like when Opus 4.6 came out, are the current skills I'm using, do I still need that, or does it take care of it for me? Does it, I have a skill that knows how to like do this one thing with like CSV files that I have. Does the new model do a better job of that than it did before? And now my skill is actually making it worse. So I need to kind of try it without it. So I got a link here to an article that shows what they've done, how they've gone through, and they've the things that they've added to it, and then how you can go take advantage of it. The cool thing I like about it is that when you install this plugin from the to use the skill creator plugin, it can look at your existing skills and it can help you, like it helps guide you on like, is the description good enough or not? Is the title good enough or not? Instead of just saying, hey, create these skill.md files, put them in a subfolder, have at it. And a lot of things are great, but I'm looking forward to, I read about this morning and I was like, oh, hell yeah. And there's a great video on YouTube about it too that I saw. There's a bunch of them. So I don't want to highlight one of them, but go take a look at this. Cool. It's pretty slick.
Neat. Awesome. Well, good pick.
Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. Julie, it's been another long episode. You and I need some sort of a shock device when we get to like 15 minutes in or 30 minutes in, because I gotta think that people are getting sick of us.
We can't do it.
It's a little too long.
I can't. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what we're gonna do. It's going to be a problem. We're going longer and longer. We're not even getting more brevity. We're getting longer.
You know what? For everybody's listening to this, who hasn't tuned out, or just at the beginning,
we're going to add some more content now. Go ahead.
Yeah. Leave us feedback. Do you like the more long-winded stuff? Yeah, do you like the length of these episodes? Question. I think the next time we come up with a topic here, we just simply go, okay, let's go through and come up with an agenda. Cool. Let's cut 50%.
Yeah, I think that's going to need to happen. Yeah.
At any rate.
All right, my friend.
Julie, good to see you again. I'll see you next time.
Great to see you. Bye.
Did you like this episode? Please like and share it with your friends. We're on YouTube, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn. You'll find all the links in the video description below. And if you have a question, head over to our site at codedeploygo.live, where you can send it in. Also, sign up for our mailing list on our site at codedeploygo.live to learn about future episodes, opportunities for listeners, and get the show notes from each episode sent straight to your inbox. We'll be back with another episode in 2 weeks.